So thank you folks for joining us. We are joined today by Dr. Ian Frank and Annette Davis from Penn, who are going to be talking today about the COVID-19 vaccine research process. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Frank, but before I do, just a couple of notes for those of you with us on Zoom. You should be able to communicate with us through the chat feature. There's also a Q&A feature. So if you type your messages into the chat, those are public, so people will see your name attached to it. If you have something that you want to ask anonymously, you can use the Q&A, which should be in the panel at the bottom of your screen. You can pull that up and there is an option to ask your questions anonymously. Anyone watching us on Facebook can ask their questions as a comment to the Facebook video, and I will be checking that and relaying those questions to our presenters. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Frank to get us started today.
So thanks a lot, and thanks everybody who is joining. What I am going to do is give you some idea about the organization of the US COVID-19 vaccine development program. And I'm going to talk specifically in detail about one study that we're doing, which is one of the studies that's furthest along, because I think that that's a good example of how the system works. And then I hope there'll be a lot of time for answering questions along the way. So first, there's been a lot of information about COVID-19 vaccines out there. And this is such a politicized issue that I think that there's been a lot of emotional feelings that have been created based upon your political orientation. So I'm going to address some of the politics, but really I want to take the politics out of this conversation. And I really want to focus on the medical aspects of COVID-19 vaccines. And I want to emphasize the importance of us all to feel that you and we can trust the process for developing an effective and safe COVID-19 vaccine, because that is ultimately the goal. The politicians are going to try to mess this up, but I want to give you reassurance that the medical community is doing this the right way, irrespective of how fast it's happening. So, these are the vaccines that are currently in the pipeline for the Warp Speed program. There are 6 of them, and actually there's a 7th one that's probably going to be introduced at some point, developed by Merck. But the 6 vaccines that are furthest along are here. The first 2, the Pfizer study and the Moderna study, use a vaccine platform called mRNA. And these studies started at the same day on July 27th. The large phase 3 study started on July 27th. AstraZeneca, their study started on August 31st. Johnson & Johnson started in September. And then Novavax just getting underway, and Sanofi GlaxoSmithKline partnership probably will begin in December. The AstraZeneca study is it's a study that uses a chimp adenovirus as the vector for the vaccine. Now, when I talk about vectors, The vaccines are generally packaged with the protein that you want to make an immune response against, and what's something called an adjuvant. The adjuvant is designed to stimulate the immune response to make the immune response better against the protein. And sometimes that adjuvant is called a vector if you're using a virus shell to carry the protein of interest. So the AstraZeneca vaccine uses a vector called a chimpanzee adenovirus. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or sometimes this is called the Janssen vaccine, uses a cold virus, adenovirus 26. And then the Novavax and Sanofi vaccines are a little bit more traditional. They use a protein with different kinds of adjuvants. Novavax, they've got this adjuvant they call matrix M, and Sanofi uses a couple of different adjuvants. It's not sure which one is moving into the latter phase studies. The early phase studies are checking 2 different adjuvants, and this is the same adjuvant that's in the shingles vaccine. So there's a lot of experience with this particular adjuvant. So these are the 6 companies. The government has already made a purchase of millions of doses of these different vaccines, so that if we have a vaccine that we know is effective and is safe, we'll have product available so that we can start to vaccinate people as soon as possible. And at Penn, we're going to be participating in 3 of these studies. We've been participating in the Moderna study. The Johnson & Johnson study is going to start at our site soon. And we will be participating in the Sanofi study later on in the fall. So these are the products, and each is developed by a major pharmaceutical company that has the capacity to make these products in large scale. Okay. Now, let me review with you the typical development process for a vaccine. So first, there are studies that are done in animals. And then once we hit the clinic, there are these 3 different phases of trial design. Phase 1 is designed primarily to look at the safety of a product. Different doses are sometimes given, different adjuvants may be given, 1 immunization may be given, 2 immunizations may be given, and a small number of individuals get each of these different doses or different numbers of shots. We may be looking at the immune response that these individuals get, but in general, it's a small number of participants that are in a phase 1 study. In a traditional vaccine study, there may be 60 people in a phase 1 study. Then, if we have a product that looks like it's safe, we move into phase 2 studies. This is a larger number of participants with greater diversity. There may be individuals with underlying medical conditions. In the phase 1 study, we generally don't include individuals with many underlying medical conditions because we don't want to confuse any side effects that somebody may experience with a disease that they may have or a medication that they may be on. In phase 2, we may also be studying different doses. We may be studying different numbers of shots, and we're going to be looking at the kind of immune response that people get in a broader sort of context. And then for the phase 3 studies, now we're ready to see whether or not the product really works. We're going to study tens of thousands of individuals, and we're going to be able to really understand what the safety profile looks like because we're giving it to so many individuals, will have the ability to identify a rare side effect that may only happen in 1 of every 1,000 or fewer people that get the vaccine. Now, you've heard people talk about this process generally taking years, and that's generally the case. But because of the urgency of the pandemic, this process is being condensed. We are not skipping things. All of the phases are being conducted, but they're being conducted in an overlapping way. And the phase 1 and phase 2 studies are being, in some sense, combined. So the phase 1 studies are larger than is typically the case. And the phase 2 end up being done, in some cases, at the time that the phase 3 are starting. The phase 3 studies are adaptable so that if we learn something from the earlier phase studies, we can change in order to make things safer or more beneficial as we move along the way. So it's important for folks to realize that the process is not being truncated, it's being streamlined so that we can move this as quickly as we possibly can. Okay, why do we need a COVID-19 vaccine? We can take a worldwide view, but all we have to do is look at the United States, and this is information it says January 21, 2020, but this is information today. This is updated today. 7.7 million people diagnosed with COVID-19 in the US, over 214,000 deaths, and 344,000 cases in the last 7 days. And if you look at the lower left-hand corner here, you can see the number of cases in the last 7 days in the 5 states with the greatest number of cases. So we've got an epidemic that has not slowed down in the United States since March. It's just shifted from different regions. And the only way out of this is really going to be through an effective vaccine, because it is clear that people in the United States are not going to use masks and follow social distancing and other precautions with the kinds of stringency that people have used these practices in other parts of the world. And so we are never going to get ahead of this epidemic through those kinds of restrictions on our personal freedom in this country. We need a vaccine. The story in Philadelphia is a little bit different. This is sort of an out-of-date slide. It only goes through the beginning of August, but the message is the same. We had this big wave of infection in the end of March and April, and then the number of new cases has declined and has been relatively steady at this rate of 150, 200 cases a day. There's been a slight uptick in the last couple of weeks. But in Philadelphia, we're doing actually pretty good. And that's the case in the Northeast, which was the part of the country that had the first wave in the United States. In the Northeast, we've learned our lesson. And I think people are more likely to use personal protective equipment, wear masks, and social distance. And so that's the reason why we've been able to minimize the number of new cases in our city. So let me just show you a little bit about the virus, and I want to give you a little bit more understanding of how these vaccines are actually made. So on the left is a picture electron micrograph of what the SARS-CoV-2 virus looks like. That's the virus that causes COVID-19. It's a coronavirus. It gets the name because these little spikes around the perimeter of the virus make it look like there is a crown around the virus. And you can see on the cartoon that these little things that look like golf tees are the spike proteins. And there's an area on the spike protein called the receptor binding domain. And it's this part of the virus, the receptor binding domain, plus some other components of the spike protein that are the part of the virus that's used to make a vaccine. You cannot get this infection from getting the vaccine because we're only using a very, very small part of the virus in engineering the vaccine. This is not like a vaccine where you've got what's called an attenuated or weakened virus. There are some live viruses that are used in vaccines, but this is not one of them. We're just using a little component of the vaccine, so you cannot get infected from getting this vaccine. So we take that little protein, we put it into a carrier, and then what we do is we give somebody a shot in the arm. And the shot in the arm leads an antigen presenting cell in our bodies to pick up that little part of the virus. So now you can see on the antigen presenting cell, we've got a little component of that spike protein. And that antigen presenting cell is going to present that little protein fragment to a B cell and to a T cell. The B cells are going to get activated. They're going to become plasma cells. The plasma cells are going to make antibodies. And we hope to stimulate the immune system to make a kind of antibody that can neutralize the virus. That means that the antibody alone, without the help of anything else, can prevent that virus from replicating. So that's the way we hope to develop an immune response that will prevent people from getting COVID-19. So we know that the higher the level of neutralizing antibodies people make, the less severe their COVID-19 disease is. So with this illness, we already understand the kind of immune response we would like a vaccine to make that appears to be important in protecting individuals from getting more severe disease. So I'm going to talk about the big study that we've done. This is the Moderna mRNA study, and I am presenting this study in detail because it's far along, and I want you to sort of see how the process works. I want you to understand how this particular study is designed. All of the studies that are being done in this Warp Speed program are somewhat similar. They all have 30,000 people or more included, and they have similar inclusion and exclusion criteria, which are designed to include almost anybody in the study who is not pregnant or breastfeeding, or who has got a disease of their immune system or taking immune suppressive medications. But I will say that people with HIV infection who are doing well on HIV therapy are allowed to participate in these studies. Okay, so here's the development timeline for the Moderna vaccine study. And here you can see how compressed things are. So They did early non-clinical studies. These are studies in test tubes, studies in animals that began in February. Keep in mind that this is a disease we're just identifying at the end of December. So we knew enough in the early, in the first couple of months after this virus was identified, we knew the entire sequence of the virus, and we could start to use molecular biology techniques to design vaccines. The first phase 1 study, that's P101, started in March. P201, that's the first phase 2 study. That started in May. And then, as I said, the first phase 3 study started on July 27th. So this is, you can see the overlapping nature of the trial designs here. It doesn't mean we're cutting things out. It means we're doing things in this condensed timeline to try to get information as possible because of the severity of the disease. So that gives you an idea of how things started and how things are moving with the first 2 vaccine studies. It's very similar if I showed you the timeline for the Pfizer study. It's very similar to this Moderna trial. So let's talk about the phase 1 study for the Moderna study so you can get an idea for the size of the studies and how things were operationalized. So the idea is to study safety, reactogenicity. The reactogenicity, that's the term that we use to talk about the kinds of symptoms that you get in the first couple of days after you get a shot. Usually pain in your arm, maybe a fever, some other things. And immunogenicity, the kind of immune response people get following the vaccine. So the study starts in individuals ages 18 to 55. And there were 120 individuals in 4 different groups. And what they did was they first start with the lower dose. If that looks safe, they move to the next higher dose. If that looks safe, they move to the next higher dose, and so on. In this case, after going to the highest dose, they went back to a lower dose in between the 25 and 100 microgram dose, again, to get a better idea of safety and the kind of immune response that people get. The idea here is to give the lowest dose that gives the best immune response. And what they did was, after studying the vaccine in younger aged individuals, they then went to small numbers of individuals of older age, 56 to 70 and over 70, in order to see whether the vaccine was safe and the kind of immune response people got in individuals who were somewhat older. So this is the stepwise phase 1 kind of trial that gets done. And it's, again, very similar, irrespective of the kind of product that we're talking about. So what kind of side effects do people get? The first vaccine studies were a 2-shot series. So I'm showing you the kinds of side effects people get after the first shot and then after the second shot. And you can see that if you look here is the percent and the severity. Gray is considered mild, blue is considered moderate, red is considered severe. And you get a sense that a lot of people, a high proportion of individuals, are getting something after they get the shot. And they're more likely to get symptoms after they get the second shot. And those symptoms are maybe a little bit worse after the second shot than after the first shot. So the most common side effects are fatigue and fever and headache. And most people get some pain after the shot. Probably one individual here is saying that they have severe fatigue. Some of these are quite subjective kinds of reports. And in general, for some of these kinds of symptoms, we just take the participant's assessment. With other kinds of things, there's a way we grade them in a slightly more objective way. But we can't tell you, if you're having mild muscle aches or moderate muscle aches, you're going to tell us. So some of this is just how people report their symptoms. On average, these symptoms last 2 days, and then they're done. And this is the most severe level that people report. So with this vaccine, most people get something. It's more likely to you're more likely to get something, and it's likely to be a little bit more irritating or distressing after the second shot. But again, it doesn't last for a very long period of time. And there's not that much difference how old you are in relationship to the kind of symptoms that you have. Now, let's look at the immune response people get. So what I'm showing you here is everybody's immune response. So everybody who participate in the study is included as a dot. And then the line here is the median, and this shows you the lowest 25th percentile and the highest percentile, and then these are the 95% confidence intervals, and if somebody's outside of that, there's a dot. So everybody's included here. And what I want you to appreciate are that after you get your first shot, so people in this study, they're getting a shot at day 14, that's somewhere here, and at day 28. So you get a shot, day 14. This is your immune response after your first shot. At day 29, we're not able to see the immune response that you're getting from the second shot. That's represented here, days 36, 43, and 57. So this is the youngest group. Everybody is getting an immune response, and it's a good one. If you're 56 to 70, everybody is getting an immune response. If you're over 70, this is just the immune response after your first shot here. This is the data point that we have available after your second shot. You can see that irrespective of how old you are, you're making a pretty good immune response. That's good, because the concern is that older folks may not make an immune response as good as younger folks. But in this study, everybody's responding. Everybody makes a good immune response irrespective of age. One other thing. This is the immune response people make after they've gotten infected. This is individuals' convalescent antibody response. These are people who've been hospitalized, sometimes not hospitalized, but they've all been infected with SARS-CoV-2. And you can see that the immune response people get to the vaccine is on average higher than the average immune response people make if they got natural infection. So that's good. It means that this vaccine is good at inducing our immune system to make a good response. What about neutralizing antibodies? Those are those antibodies that can work by themselves. And again, you can see here that these antibodies have the ability to neutralize virus in that sort of like pink bar that goes across the slide. That's the range of neutralizing antibody responses that were seen in a few individuals that got natural infection. And again, you can see that people who get the vaccine have higher levels in general than what we're seeing following natural infection. So a good immune response. All right. That was the phase 1 study. Here's the phase 2 study. Remember, the phase 1 study maybe started with 15 people, then added an additional 10. Here, we're looking at 2 different doses, 50 and 100, and we're giving the vaccine to 50 people at a time. That's in the first cohort. 300 people, ages 18 to 55, and 50 people over 55. We evaluate the safety, and then we're going to add another 250 individuals over the age of 55. So now we're doing a study with 600 individuals instead of a study that has maybe 150 individuals. And this is a typical size study for a phase 2 trial. And this study is ongoing. It's been enrolled, and we are seeing what the kinds of experiences are in these individuals that are still being followed. And we have some idea about the symptoms that these people get, and it's very similar to the symptoms that I showed you before. What I showed you before are people broken down by those that we know got the active vaccine. In this analysis, we're combining the placebo group and the people who got the vaccine. It has not been broken out yet, so I don't have that information to share with you. But this is the cumulative reports of these kinds of symptoms following the vaccination. Again, some of these people are getting a placebo, so the proportion of individuals with these symptoms is going to be higher if we could just focus on the real vaccine, but I don't have that information. Very similar, though, to what I showed you before, and people are more likely to have symptoms after the second shot than after the first shot. Again, it's very similar based upon age. It doesn't matter how old you are, you get the similar kinds of symptoms, and again, it's more or less the same. Okay. I want to, I mentioned that on average, these symptoms last for 2 days. I wanted to show you that information so you're not just taking my word for it. But here's the median time, or the mean time, the average time the symptoms last. And you can see pain lasts for 2.5 days, redness lasts for less than 2 days, swelling lasts for less than 2 days, fever just about a little bit more than a day, headache, fatigue for a couple of days. In some individuals, over here on the right, there's the minimum and maximum. You can see in some individuals it goes longer. What that means is, because we're looking at the average, if in somebody it goes 10 days, it means, and the average is 2, it means in most people it's only going 0 or 1 in order to get an average of 2. It doesn't mean that, the symptoms can't last a little bit longer, but they don't last for a long period of time. Okay. Now, the big Moderna study is called the COVE study. Here's some of the details. It's a study going on in 89 sites across the United States. 30,000 people are going to be in the study. The study is going to last for 25 months. There's 7 visits. And the inclusion criteria are pretty open. You have to be 18 years or older, able to give informed consent, not have a history of COVID-19. If you have an underlying medical condition, it needs to be relatively stable. If you've got cancer, you can participate, but you can't be needing cancer chemotherapy. If you have heart failure, hypertension, or diabetes, you're in, but they have to be stable because if you're having a lot of medical problems, those medical problems probably need to be attended to, and we don't want to confuse side effects from other medications people need to get or from their illness with side effects that people get from the vaccine. Like I said, some participants can't be pregnant or breastfeeding women, and no illnesses are on therapy that can impair the immune system, although like I said, people with HIV doing well on therapy can participate. Here's a map. You can see the dots are where the sites where individuals are being evaluated and studied, and it's in parts of the country where the COVID-19 epidemic is most severe. So, we want to include individuals in this study who are at risk for getting COVID-19. Those are older individuals. Those are individuals with underlying medical conditions. Those are individuals that have occupations that put them at the front line. These are individuals that are racial and ethnic minorities that are more affected by the epidemic. I'm not going to go into the details here, but these are the details of the points that I've just been trying to emphasize. And it's essential that when we're done with these studies, we will be able to say, this vaccine works. It works in older individuals. It works in the individuals with the underlying medical conditions that are most likely to get hospitalized if they get this virus. It works in whites. It works in blacks. It works in Latinos. It works in the populations that represent the diversity of our population here in the United States. And that is critical, and it is a challenge. The enrollment ends up being stratified so that we make sure that there are similar numbers of individuals that get the vaccine versus get a placebo, depending upon age or underlying medical factors that may put them at risk for more severe disease. So it's a feature of the study design to make sure that there's not a bias in how the vaccine is distributed, which could, make us not be able to know that the vaccine is going to be effective in different groups. So, what I didn't mention, but is important, is half the people in the study get the real vaccine and half of the people get a placebo. And we're following people to see if they get COVID-19. And if people have symptoms of COVID-19, we will be having them come to us, or we will go to people's homes and we will do a nasal swab to see whether or not individuals have COVID-19. If people do have COVID-19, we will follow them closely in order to make sure that their disease does not progress to a more severe extent. And if that is happening, we will make sure that we refer them to get the medical care that they need. Also, participants fill out diary cards, or it's an online app. They fill out an app online that lets us know the kinds of side effects they get after the vaccine and whether or not they have symptoms of COVID-19. And we call people frequently, again, to see how well people are doing and to understand if they have any symptoms that could be related to COVID-19. So there's not very many visits, but there is very close follow-up that we hope will ensure the safety of individuals, not only from getting the vaccine, but identifying individuals quickly that may have COVID-19. And we want to know how long individuals are protected, and that's why people are being followed for so long. Whether we have a vaccine that Donald Trump approves, even without safety and efficacy data before the election, these studies are going on for 2 years so that we know how safe and effective this is in the long haul or the longer haul, politics aside. So this is a little bit more details of the analysis plan and how things work. There are the 2 shots that people get a month apart, and then the number of individuals that get COVID-19 will determine how fast we can say whether or not the vaccine is effective. The study is designed with the assumption that the vaccine will be 60% effective at reducing the kind of clinical illness that people get. And there are a couple of different times during the study, depending on the number of people diagnosed with COVID-19, at which time the Data Safety Monitoring Board, which is a totally independent group of individuals, will look at this information and will be able to say whether or not there was 60% or more effectiveness that was observed. And if we see that early, if the vaccine is more than 60% effective, we may be able to say relatively quickly that this is an effective vaccine. If not, we may need to study people longer to see how long it takes before there are enough people diagnosed for us to be able to make any kinds of conclusions. So the speed at which we can determine whether something is effective is influenced by the number of cases and the percent of effectiveness.
So Ian, if I can jump in with a question that just came in.
Sure.
So does that mean that the vaccine would not be approved until all of that data is collected and analyzed?
That's the way it generally is. You know, that's the way the FDA generally works. Again, there's politics here. And we can, you know, it's possible that the Trump administration is going to overrule the FDA and is going to make something available before we know that this is effective. Now, I can tell you that available does not mean it's available. You know, if Trump says tomorrow we're going to approve a vaccine, it doesn't mean anybody's going to be able to get it. And I can tell you, because I am on calls at least once a week with the entire organization that is leading these studies. The investigators who are doing this work, and I'm leading these studies here at Penn, participate in a conference call of the entire group at least once a week, and sometimes there are more calls than those. So we get updates regularly. There are email updates that are happening, you know, multiple times a week. So I can tell you from the highest authority that's not involved with politics, that's just about, you know, on the medical side, that if Trump tomorrow says a vaccine is available, this vaccine is not, there's no vaccine that is going to be available probably until the beginning of the year, because there's just not that much vaccine that's been produced at this point in time to give people two shots. And, you know, so forget about the politics. Listen to what Tony Fauci says. Listen to what the medical establishment says. Those people will be telling you reality. If you listen to Fox News, if you listen to what Trump says, if you listen to Azar, Secretary Azar, you will not necessarily get factual information. Fauci and the other medical people who are doing the research will tell you the realities here. And those are the people that we need to turn to hear accurate information. So just need to emphasize that. There's the medical community has the entire intention of developing these vaccines to assure the public that at the end of the day, we will have a safe and effective vaccine. There are people who may say that, you know, I have my own personal interest in this because I'm doing this work, but I say that with as much honesty and sincerity as I possibly have as somebody who, is devoting his entire career to the health and well-being of people living with HIV and now with COVID-19 and preventing these illnesses in individuals. So we got to trust somebody. And I'm telling you that you can trust the medical community that's doing this work to do it the right way. The government currently is, got a different agenda, but the medical community doesn't. We've got the same agenda, but we do want to move fast. I mean, that's something that we agree with, the administration. This is not going to be something that's going away until we have an effective vaccine. So we need this, and we need it quickly. And once we have it, we need the public to trust us that we're telling the truth, that we have something that's safe and effective. That's really key. Everybody will make their own individual choice, but I can tell you this. When I know that there's a safe and effective vaccine, I want it as soon as possible. And I want my friends and families and coworkers to get this as soon as possible. And I'll take the risk of a weird, side effect that, it may happen 6 months from now, because in the vaccine world, we don't see side effects that happen 6 months after a vaccine. You develop side effects after a vaccine when your immune response against the vaccine is at its peak. And that's generally within 2 to 4 weeks after you get your shot. And then your immune response is at its highest. And then if you don't get exposed again, you don't get another shot, it goes down. So the risk for side effects is highest when your immune response is making an immune response against the vaccine. And that's 2 to 4 weeks after your shot. So if we have safety data 2 months after people get their second shot in this study, that's likely to represent the side effects that people get. I hear about every single severe side effect that people get in this vaccine study. I hear about every one. I get an email message. There is no message, there is no side effect that of severe nature that anybody is reporting more than 2 months after getting a shot. And there's been 14,000 people that have gotten this vaccine in this phase 3 study. So that's a lot of people. It doesn't mean a rare side effect won't happen after somebody gets a shot, but it's really unlikely that somebody's going to get something severe that is a late side effect of this or any of the vaccines. So this is my last slide. If you're interested, if somebody's interested in participating, they can go to this website. You can register to be included in the study. Annette, if you want to share our phone number with
Yes, thank you. Or you can call this phone number, and please take it down, 215-746-7347. That's 215-746-7347.
And put it in the chat so that people can see.
I'm also going to put my email. Excuse me?
I just put the number in as you were talking.
Oh, great! Thank you. You want to also put in my email address, because they can also email me as well, and I will respond to them immediately. Well, let me just say, when I say immediate, it will be within 24 hours at the most, if not immediate.
So there's one question, Hayeshi, that is in the chat. And the question is about the vaccine study at Oxford. So that's the AstraZeneca study. So some of these studies are happening in the US and some of them are happening outside the US. And how the studies get handled depends upon the regulatory bodies in each different country. So somebody in the AstraZeneca study got some side effect that was described as a neurological condition called transverse myelitis, suggesting that there's inflammation in the spinal cord. Now, I cannot give you any details about that because the British equivalent of the Food and Drug Administration has not released details of the case because of confidentiality regulations in Britain. The British equivalent of the Food and Drug Administration has allowed the study to continue enrolling and following people in Britain. The US Food and Drug Administration is given details of this event. And the US Food and Drug Administration is reviewing that event and is making a determination about whether or not the study should continue in the United States. Again, I can't give you details because I am not an investigator on that study, and it would only be investigators that have access to that information. So at some point, we will know whether or not the FDA has given a green light for the study to continue. I understand that the Johnson & Johnson study, which we are about to start, was put on a pause yesterday. And actually, I'm not sure if it's because of a safety issue. The study is designed for a pause after the first 2,000 individuals are recruited. The first 2,000 individuals will include individuals without underlying medical conditions. And then if we see that the study is safe in those folks, then we open up the study to individuals with underlying medical conditions. And so I'm not sure if the pause is due because there was a safety event or because it was just the natural pause in the study. And I've gotten an alert about the pause, but I don't know, again, at this moment, the reason for the pause. There was something that was in the paper that talked about an adverse event, but I don't know if there really was an adverse event or if it was just the pause that was designed. So I hope to get a little bit more information today. So, but this should be, in a way, this Oxford case and this pause stuff should be reassuring. Safety is being carefully monitored in these studies. And if there's a reason to stop and wait before we continue, we're going to do that to make sure that we are not putting people at risk. So that is something that is important for people to understand.
So if anyone else here has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'm also checking Facebook for those of us who are watching there. One thing I just wanted to clarify, Ian. So there being a pause in a study, even if it was because of an adverse reaction from a participant, that's not all that unusual in a clinical trial, is it?
No,
I know it gets the publicity, but that can come up in many cases.
It happens all the time. And look, when you're studying 30,000 people, there's people are going to get sick, and it's going to happen in a random way. And if they get sick, you don't know if they're getting sick because they got the shot or if it's totally unrelated. And in these studies, we won't know whether or not individuals got the placebo or the real thing when they report a side effect. We will not be unblinded. There's somebody that's looking at that information. The Food and Drug Administration, the Data Safety Monitoring Board is looking at that information, but the people who are doing the study, we will never know until the end whether or not that event was in somebody who got the vaccine or somebody who got the placebo. So, because otherwise that unblinds us, and then we may be looking a little bit more closely for that kind of symptom or side effect in people. So, so pauses happen a lot. As I said, studies are often designed with pauses built into the trial to have a look, make sure you've had the opportunity to gather all the data, analyze it, make sure it's safe before moving forward. You know, there's a lot of information that's being generated when you're looking at 30,000 people who are entering something onto a diary on their, on their phone every single day for a week after getting a shot. So there's a lot of information that gets collected. It takes a little while to gather it, to make sure that it's, there in a reliable format, and then to take a look and figure out whether or not it's telling us that there's something that we need to be concerned about or not.
And then this coronavirus prevention network, the slide that's currently on the screen. So this, am I correct that this is sort of a general intake system where folks can sign up and then be contacted if they could fit what researchers are looking for any of these studies?
Yes. So the COVID-19 prevention network is organized through 3 different networks: the HIV vaccine trial network, the HIV prevention network, and the vaccine and treatment evaluation units network. These are 3 different networks that are funded by the National Institutes of Health. These are the largest prevention networks and the networks that focus on vaccines in the country, actually in the world. There are a lot of international sites that participate in these networks. And it's the leadership of these networks that are leading the COVID-19 prevention response. So it's the same people that are doing the HIV work that are doing the COVID-19 work. It's this, same leadership. And these are people that we've been working with for decades. You can trust them. These are good people. So that's the organizational framework. And they've created an opportunity for individuals who are interested in participating to register. Those aren't always the people that we want to study, because sometimes the people who would like to participate in the studies are people who are the worried folks who are not at very much risk. So we do take some discretion, and not everybody who says, "Oh, I want to participate," are the ideal candidates for us. So we don't discriminate, and it's hard to contact everybody. There's over 7,000 people in Philly that have expressed an interest in participating in these studies. So, and there's over 200,000 people nationwide that have expressed an interest. So we can't get in touch with everybody. If you're really interested, the more reliable way to get in touch with us is to make the phone call using the number that Annette provided.
Well, thank you so much. It doesn't look like there are any other questions coming in, but thank you for joining us, Dr. Frank, and for sharing all of this information. And if there's any closing words you want to leave folks with, I'll leave it to you.
Well, I would just say we'd appreciate if you spread the word. This is an elder initiative, and older folks are the folks that are most vulnerable to this illness. And it's the folks we are really interested in including in our trials. And so, we are speaking to, I'm not quite sure how many folks are out there, but you all have your own networks, and spreading the word, particularly to individuals who are folks of color, is something that would really help us help meet our mission. Our mission is to do this work. So we would appreciate your support in any way. And the way that you can show us the most support is spreading the news.